Welcome to the Rainmaker Podcast, a weekly show for visionary founders and team members alike to come together and share the heartfelt, the cringe, and the radically honest truths about what it's really like to build and work for brands with the highest levels of visibility. I'm your host, Veronica Romney, and after working for some of the biggest names in the online space myself, I've learned that it takes both leadership and collaboration to truly scale a company to its greatest potential. And I'm here to do one thing: empower leaders, teams, and dreams. So let's make it rain on today's episode. Kaitlyn, welcome to the Rainmaker Podcast.
Thanks for having me, Veronica. I'm so excited about this.
Okay, both of us were like giggling like girls before I officially pushed record because I don't know the order that when the podcast will come out, but you are my first guest expert podcast recording.
I am so honored. I can't even tell you.
No pressure. Okay, so you and I got put together. Our friendship blossomed because of a mutual friend putting us together.
Yes.
Which is always a really great way to meet somebody. And I know a lot about you, and I literally tell you to the world, but would you do me a favor and just introduce yourself for anybody who's listening for the first time?
Sure. Hi, worlds. Welcome to Veronica's podcast. You should tune in to every episode. My name is Kaitlyn Carlson. I am the founder of Theory Planning Partners. I'm a certified financial planner, a certified exit planning advisor, and an accredited wealth management advisor. And I started Theory after spending 10 years in finance, initially on the asset management side, and then I transitioned into private wealth management. So I spent most of my 20s working with the wealthiest families in America, many of whom were business owners. Did over 300 financial plans in my time with UBS Financial Services, but realized that business owners were being severely underserved by the wealth management model. And interestingly, of those 300 clients, not one of them was a self-made woman. So I wanted to do something about that. And so I left corporate and started Theory in 2020, and here we are.
Okay, number one, I feel like I'm the same way because I started my career. I was 20 years old at Ancestry.com deploying emails to like millions of people. And like, who gave me access to those buttons? But you too, you were in your young 20s, managing huge portfolios, working with some very big names and big accounts. Like, can we talk about some of the intimidation maybe that you felt early on, like being so young, being a female yourself in what I would say a very male-dominated industry, unless you disagree?
No, I completely agree. It's still incredibly male dominated. And yes, if you want to talk about imposter syndrome, I'll never forget. I think it was my third financial plan ever. I was delivering to someone who had $5.5 million and was getting ready to retire. And I had never seen that much money in my life. So all I could think in my head was, who is this guy to trust me? And so it was interesting. I think I was 24, and I just had to keep telling myself, you know what, like, this guy isn't studying for a CFP. You know, he's not in the trenches of this day to day. He runs a waste management company. So I had to kind of hype myself up in my head as the expert, but it was definitely scary. And I think the thing that you realize, especially being an entrepreneur reinforces this, but you only really learn by doing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like one thing to read the CFP material and memorize all that stuff, but it's another thing to be in a client interaction, having those conversations. And so I pretty quickly learned, like, yes, our industry has a lot to do with the numbers and strategy and all that stuff, but you have to have high emotional intelligence as well, because you're dealing with human beings. If you're a portfolio manager and you're dealing with stocks, that's a whole nother thing, but dealing with human beings takes it to another level of complication, without a doubt.
100%. So, okay, we're not doing waste management companies. Now you work with people, similar profile of clients and members that I work with, which is more of, like you said, online entrepreneurs, small business owners, females, face forward, personality driven businesses. And I know that we are not allowed to disclose the names, but I can just say to people listening, she works with some big names. And you see behind the scenes. I often tell people there's nothing more vulnerable for a business owner than disclosing your numbers to somebody. I feel like, in a sense, it's like you're the most naked because you can't hide anything,
Mm.
right? Like on social media, we portray to the world the persona that we want to put out there. Certainly a highlight reel of sorts, but you are behind the scenes on the money side. You see where literally things are happening, and you also have dialogues with your clients about, where they want to go 5 years from now, 10 years from now, and then you help them get there. Yes? Like, walk me through a typical week for you working with the type of clients that you serve.
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought that up because I think when I first started getting into the online space, these are marketing
Mm-hmm.
geniuses. So everything looks so perfect from the outside. And I even initially was a little intimidated,
Mm-hmm.
like, wow, this is amazing. Now, when someone says to me, oh, she runs a $5 million business, I'm like, yeah, okay, let me get into the numbers and see. So for every single client, we go through a very thorough discovery process, which is a financial plan in its most basic form is where are we now, where do we want to go, and how do we get there? I approach it from the personal side
Mm.
because, and I often say this, like if you're running a business and it's not helping you achieve financial independence, then it's a really expensive hobby and you're kidding yourself.
Yeah.
But it's true. And I think being a business owner is a really good, quote unquote, good excuse to be distracted and not pay attention to what really matters, which is actually saving and investing and building personal wealth. But there are constant fires in businesses that take their attention away from that. So my job is really to remain that 30,000 foot person who's saying, like, hey, yeah, all that stuff is valid, but remember what the overall goal is. So I pull them out of the business and we have higher level strategic conversations. So just going back, so we start with discovery. We do a very thorough discovery process. A lot of my clients are married and have kids. So we take their spouse's income into account. We take, how old their children are into account, basically lay out exactly what their financial situation looks like personally right now.
Mm-hmm.
And then my favorite conversation is the goals conversation,
Mm.
which is like, what do you want this money to do for you? When do you want to be financially independent? What are your highest values? Is it education? Is it travel? A lot of clients feel like they want to work for forever and feel like their business gives them purpose, which I completely agree. And I love that. It means that they have found their purpose in life. But often, what I have to remind them of is you won't feel the same way at 60 that you do today. So give yourself the luxury of putting yourself in a position where if you are 60 and you're saying, you know what, I don't want to do this anymore,
Mm-hmm.
at least you have the luxury of walking away.
Mm-hmm.
Or, or if you want to sell your company, some of my clients want to sell their company, that takes us down a completely different path. And there are a lot of other things that we need to consider if we're going more that enterprise building to sell route.
Well, it's interesting because, like, when I speak with my clients, certainly either from a consulting perspective, if I'm working with them as a fractional chief of staff or whether they're inside my program, but like, I think the sexy thing or the thing that I hear most common is building a company to sell. However, when I even see behind the scenes like you do, they're running it like a lifestyle business. So can we just talk about that, because there is a massive difference not only in what your profit and loss statements look like for a lifestyle business versus, like you said, with the intentions of scaling it to sell it, but I think there's almost like a negative connotation where people look down at someone if they're like, well, I just want to run a lifestyle business. And I don't understand that narrative, because I think, especially when working with women, especially working with families, whether male or female, that have young children, like, there's certain chapters in life where home life is extremely demanding. I have a 5-year-old and an 8-year-old. I know you have little ones at home too. So, like, let's talk about that. Let's give an understanding. What does it mean running a lifestyle business versus running a business with the intentions of scaling to sell it?
That's a great question. So I would say I would say my number one myth buster in this space is that from a personal wealth standpoint, I've seen people achieve the same level of personal wealth from a lifestyle business that they have from running a business that's been scaled and sold. So you can get to the same place two different ways,
Hmm.
and one is not better than the other. And it's really interesting because through the discovery process, I've actually had some clients reconsider whether they want to build a company to sell it and actually shift more towards a lifestyle business. Now, I will say, from a definitional standpoint, if you're running a lifestyle business, your savings is and investing is going to be responsible for securing your financial independence. If you're running an enterprise business, meaning that you're building it to sell it, likely the net proceeds from that sale are going to make up the chunk of your nest egg to secure your financial independence. You should also consider doing peripheral saving around that. There are tax benefits to saving alongside of that. But I would say that's the fundamental difference between the two. So if you're lifestyle, it's on you to secure your financial independence. If you're building to sell, the net proceeds from that sale are going to secure your financial independence.
Why do you think people like look down at lifestyle businesses? Why? It's like if I say, "Hey, I'm running a lifestyle business and loving it for this stage of my personal life with my kids, the ages that they are, and where I am in my dynamic and things like that." Why is that? Why is there this narrative that like, well, I'm not a serious business owner then? Like, why do you think that exists in this industry?
Because I think it's superficiality. And I think it comes down to I think it comes down to a microcosm of the online space, which is why this saying resonates so well, which is revenue is vanity, profit is sanity, cash is king. I mean, it's true. So, sure, tell me your revenue numbers. They sound really impressive. But if you're
Mm-hmm.
running in the red, there I can't do anything to help you.
Mm-hmm.
I have a much better chance of helping a lifestyle business owner who runs really lean and is saying, "Hey, I'm saving $50,000 a month and I have no idea what to do with this." She may have no team members, but that and she may just have contractors, but that's someone who has a real chance at building personal wealth. So I'm more impressed by someone who comes to me with that situation than someone who's running a $4.5 million business and has 15 employees, because there might not be that much I can do for you if you're running at a loss.
Well, yeah. I mean, because you literally specialize in exits, right? And can we talk about this too? Because I think there is another misconception. I work a lot with personality driven businesses or expert led businesses, face forward businesses where the key spokesperson for the company is a personality, and it's not the gecko and it's not mayhem or flow, but like it's a real person and they're the expert and the business is built underneath or around their expertise, right? But I think there's this belief or misconception that if you are a personality like run business that it is not a sellable asset because you can't sell yourself. Is that true or is that false?
I would say it's false, but there are steps that you need to take. I would say owner dependency is the number one red flag or issue that we see when people are trying to build to sell, which is why something like Rainmaker Residency is so helpful and so important, because it's not going to be an overnight process to remove owner dependency. It typically takes 3 to 5 years, which is why if clients are coming to us and saying, I want to get out of this, or I don't want to be doing this for forever, thinking 3 to 5 years in advance before they're completely burned out can make all the difference, because we don't want you've put so much into this. We don't want you to have to just liquidate the business.
Mm.
If you're proactive about it and you really have forethought and
Mhm.
are intentional, then there are steps that we can take, like Rainmaker Residency, like slowly over time, training clients
Mhm.
to not just see the face of the brand, and it also comes down to how strong is your team. And this is whether you're running $1 million business or $100 million business or $1 billion business.
Right.
Like, what does client retention look like? What do contracts look like? How strong is your team? How happy is your team? All that stuff matters in the eyes of a buyer. But certainly owner dependency is probably like the number one ding, I
Mhm.
guess. And so that's usually where we start if someone's expressed an interest in selling.
Well, yeah, because they want to sell, but they're literally everywhere in the business. They're a part of the marketing efforts, they're a part of the fulfillment efforts, they're a part of like literally every major core lane of a business, and yet they want to sell. And sadly, at least from my perspective, they want to sell not because it's like a crescendo to their achievement. They want to sell because they've hit this wall and they are massively burnt out and their mental health is not in a good place. Would you disagree?
Mm. No, I would completely agree with that. And the funny thing that happens in prepping a company for sale is sometimes owners fall back in love with their business.
Ooh, what do you mean?
So once they fix all the things that are broken, and it's exactly like selling a house.
Sure.
If you let the house go, it's going to take a lot of money and a lot of effort to get it up to speed to put on the market. But if you're slowly making improvements year over year, you could be ready to put your house on the market tomorrow if you're a good homeowner. It's the same thing with a business. If you're incrementally making positive changes in your business, then it gets easier. And then you end up enjoying your business again because you're not run down. So we've actually had that happen before where we've started down the path of preparing them to sell. And then they're like, wait a minute, I have a business that's almost running entirely on its own. And now I can start taking distributions from it as an owner and, living a nice lifestyle. So it's in all that preparation, sometimes people change course and they actually fall in love with their business again.
It's really interesting because that's a perfect analogy. When Scott and I were selling our house in Florida to move to North Carolina, there was two bathrooms that we hadn't like fixed up because it was like whatever, it doesn't matter. One was in the kids' room, one was like in the hallway. And but then in getting it ready to sell, we're like, no, kitchens and bathrooms sell houses. We have to finish like this Florida flamingo pink tile has to go. And so we like did all this beautiful work on these two spare bathrooms that were not in our personal lives the priority. And then when we finished, took us like literally a weekend, but when we finished, we were like, what the hell? Why did we like wait so long to do this? It's so nice. And we regret
Yes.
that. We regret that we waited so long to do these things. And then now we didn't get to enjoy the fruit of that because we basically did it for someone else to enjoy it. And so now in the home
Mm-hmm.
that we have, we're like, no, let's put time into this. And like you said, it's a gradual. We're doing like 1% improvements here and there. But you grow to love your home when you start putting your personal touches on the home. And I think that's such a great analogy. Like these people are so these entrepreneurs that you and I work with in particular, they're so burned out. Their mental health is sometimes in a really, really bad place if you talk to like their therapist or mindset expert and coach. And so like, I'm out, I want to be out, I can't take this anymore. It's very common for me to hear the language, I want to burn it to the ground, right? Like that's usually one of the
Mm-hmm.
things I hear the most. And so they go to try to sell thinking it could be a fast sell. It's certainly not. My parents took a year and a half to even sell their business freak after 32 years. But so they try to sell it to solve the pain. But then to your point, they have to fix up the business so it looks good to a buyer, just like you fix up your house. And then in the process, they're like, oh, I can't be everywhere in the business because that devalues the business. And now that I'm not
Mm-hmm.
everywhere in the business, wait a minute, it's not so bad.
Exactly. Yeah, which is why, so I am an exit planning advisor and I can specialize in that path, but I do work with both. I work with both lifestyle business owners
Right.
and people who want to exit. Because to me, it's more about, how do we
Yeah.
intentionally and sustainably build personal wealth. And sometimes, actually oftentimes it ends up being a combination of the two.
Mhm.
But yeah, the house analogy, I think, really sits well with people because it's tangible and they
Mhm.
can relate to it.
Mhm.
And it is exactly the same thing. It's like, wait, now that I've removed all the pain, this is actually quite enjoyable. And like, I remember why I got into this in the first place.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think a lot of us start businesses because we're deeply passionate about something or we're an expert in a category. We see a problem or a need or a hole in the marketplace, and we're like our little visionary minds just go 1 + 1 = 10, and we're like really excited about
Hmm.
the opportunity, the blue ocean, we're all the things. And then you realize going into business, like, oh, I'm such a good marketer, but running a business isn't being a marketer all the time. Like running a business is
Mm,
also doing my QuickBooks and this and that and the legalities and like, wow, this is. So it can be deflating for those first time entrepreneurs. But then after, like you said, after a couple years of that grind, you're like, not only is it deflating, but I feel like I'm torturing myself. And that's just not how it should
Mhm.
be. And to your point, if it takes on average, 3 to 5 years to remove the owner dependency, if you know that from day zero, like you registering your LLC of your business, how much more intentionality can you put knowing that like, I have to start thinking of removing myself from day one. I have to, right?
Yes, absolutely. And one thing that just came to mind that I do feel the need to say, especially in the online space, is there's this compulsive desire to hire coaches. I've seen people spend 5 figures, 6 figures on masterminds
Yeah.
or coaches that offer one solution. In my mind, I think they have a place,
Hmm.
but I think you would be wise to surround yourself with advisors, not just coaches. Advisors being a strategic outsourced CFO, a bookkeeper, a tax strategist, a financial planner, people who are advising you and have their hands in the numbers and a finger on the pulse of your business and are able to give you actionable advice versus spending $50,000 on a mastermind where only you're showing up and they're giving you like shoot from the hip advice, because that still just lands you in the position of you're doing everything, you're taking the advice. Whereas advisors can help lift and elevate you out of that position by telling you when to hire or telling you what revenue goals to focus on. Like, I've been in some conversations where they say, okay, what's your 90-day goal? And it's just picking something out of thin air. Like
Mm.
that has no intention. And I think women, especially, for some reason, just throw money at good marketing without being really intentional about why am I spending this money? How is this going to benefit me? What's the
Sure.
return on investment? And I think that's where that's where when you and I really hit it off, I found Rainmaker residency so different because
Mm.
by the time people go through Rainmaker residency, the owner will be lifted out of that
Sure.
position. And so that to me is like, okay, that's a results driven investment.
Yeah.
And so I think women need to be, and I say women because I work exclusively with women, but I think women need to be more discerning about dropping 5 or 6 figures on coaching, you know.
Man, it's so funny to me because I feel like not that I would deem you as a quiet one, but you are so like eloquent and soft spoken and like regal to me, and then yet you drop these like fire bombs, like these like mic drop moments. Like, yeah, this coaching industry, yeah, can we just talk about that for a second? Is not the same as being an advisor. I'm like, oh snap. No, but I don't disagree with you.
Hot take.
I would add a layer to what you're saying though, because I feel like, and maybe this is just what I'm exposed to, but when somebody comes to me for the very first time and they hear my previous experience working, with some of the names, it's very often that I hear somebody go, "Well, I saw that you worked at Boss Babe, like, and I love Boss Babe, and I think what they've done is amazing, and I just want to replicate what they've done." I'm like, "Hold on a minute." And I think that happens certainly, maybe potentially in a mastermind setting or in that. I think there's a lot of emulating, looking up to what we think is how something is or how something is run, and the desire to try to copy or get as close to the idea of something because like, well, that looks successful. Can I just take that playbook, and if I use that exact same playbook for me, whether it's the marketing launch type, the marketing strategies, the brand positioning, et cetera, if I do the same playbook, I must therefore have the same level of success. And that does not work. That does not work at all. Number one, you don't know what's going on behind the scenes. And the two of us in particular know what happens behind the scenes. And let me just say, at a nice way of putting it, everybody has messy junk drawers. At the more extreme behind the scenes business infrastructure that you and I are privy to, it is a hoarder's house with insane like turnover and like, where is this money going and why did we spend it on this? Like, it's just nuts, right? But people don't see that stuff, so they just try to emulate or they try to like replicate what they think would deem successful results, and then it's really hard for me to watch that in particular because number one, on a personal level and on a value standpoint, I don't want anybody to be anything other than themselves. Like you
Hmm.
don't have to copy anyone else to be successful. You can just be you and do what you do and like almost put horse blinders and just go to serve someone or solve a problem and you'll be fine. But there is a lot of copycats. There's a lot of copying in our industry and I don't. And then I hear that too. I hear those in the mastermind settings. Well, so and so sold the company for X amount. Well, so and so has a membership model, and membership models had a have a higher blank X return, and so everybody starts to copy or they start to adopt business models that they actually don't have a passion for whatsoever because they think
Mm,
that's the ticket to money. Do you see that as
yes,
well?
I do. And that's where hiring an advisor
Mm-hmm.
it makes all the difference versus
Mm-hmm.
sitting in a mastermind and assuming.
Mm-hmm.
Because the thing is, no one deal is the same. It might have been a strategic advisor that bought that business for a very specific
Mm-hmm.
reason, and you have no idea what that is. So to just draw a blanket conclusion that the membership model equals X is incorrect. And you may have a gem sitting there that, a financial buyer or a strategic acquisition, like you never know. I mean, every buyer is different
Yeah.
and values different things. So that's why having access to like deal advisory or a CFO, and also the things that they look for might not be what you think that they look for.
Mm-hmm.
They're looking for client retention. They're looking because a buyer is buying a cash flow machine. So you could have a much smaller business than somebody else. You could have half the revenue. But if your company is run better than theirs, you could get the same price tag as the person that has double the revenue. And that comes down to the basics of evaluation, which I think that's very important. And I don't find this ecosystem to be that familiar with, not, nor should they. I mean, they don't have a ton of M&A, mergers and acquisitions experience. But again, that's why theory is working with the women that we're working with, because how would you know? It's our responsibility to come to you and explain to you
Yeah.
how things work.
I know, because I invited you into the Rainmaker Residencies. The Rainmaker Residency is my group program that I basically help the founder not be the main marketer for their company anymore, because that's like where most of their time
Mm-hmm.
gets sucked in. And so every 2 weeks we do visionary CEO only calls. They're private calls. We're not recording the calls. And I invited Kaitlyn to come onto one of those calls. And I remember one of the advice that you gave, and I think it's solid advice. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, you give this advice regardless if somebody is running a lifestyle business or has the exit strategy in play. But you basically are like, everybody should get their business evaluated, period, end of story. Right?
Yes, from a personal planning standpoint, because actually someone in Rainmaker Residency had a financial advisor who treated their business as being valued at zero. And that's a big mistake because that opens the business owner up to liability.
Mm.
So if you're running a $10 million business, but you don't know it and you're treating the business as being worth zero, and you have your child's friend comes over to play and slips and falls in the pool, you could get sued and be open to massive liability exposure without even knowing it because the financial advisor was treating that asset as worth zero. And that's not true. So, and wealth building is not only about wealth accumulation, it's also about wealth preservation and wealth protection.
Right.
So, it's those two things together. So, yes, I mean, if you're in the early years and you're still trying to figure out, I don't necessarily think you need to have your business valued. But once you're established, once you have recurring revenue, once you have a real valuable asset, then we need to know for protection purposes what that asset is worth because it is a line item on your balance sheet.
Yep.
And I think that makes us completely different than the financial advising and wealth management industry is we take a very vested interest in that line item on your balance sheet versus ignoring it, which is what typical financial advisors do.
Yeah, that's a good point. We'll be back with this interview right after the commercial break. Did you know that I have a free Rainmaker hiring kit? Skip the formal recruiting process and learn how to source Rainmaker applicants that are already connected to you. I'll show you how to turn a walking testimonial into a rockstar team member for free. Head to veronicarami.com or click the link in my show notes to get your hands on the free Rainmaker hiring kit. Now let's get back to the show. Okay, so let's do this because I think anybody that's listening to the Remaker podcast might be in different spots in their business. So some people are still thinking about starting the business. Some people are already at seven figures, like the kind of clients that you and I work with. So going back to that discernment, because I love that, the gift of discernment. And I think women in particular, not to make a over stereotypical comment here, but I do personally believe that women tend to be more sensitive and if they're in tune with themselves, but that gift of discernment is super. I use it all. I mean, I use it every day. I use it every day as a mother. I use it every day as a spouse. Like I use it literally every day to discern good situations for myself, my children, my family, my loved ones, my business, right? So how do I know when it's time to call Kaitlyn? How do I like I guess help me discern or help me to know what the phases are and best practices at certain levels of my business when I need to bring on a CFO, when I need to bring on a Kaitlyn, what like because I literally will just throw you at everybody that I meet. Like that's just the kind of friend that I am. Like Kaitlyn, you need everybody needs Kaitlyn. But maybe that's not the best advice. So help small business owners, help online entrepreneurs to know when it's time to make the call.
Okay, that's a great question. So after observing the space for a while, I've kind of broken it down into three phases. So I would say phase one is you're starting, you may or may not be paying yourself, you may or may not know where you fit into the market.
Mm-hmm.
You may pay a bookkeeper hourly to
Mm-hmm.
just do that job, same thing with an accountant. So that's phase one. And in that, I've seen range anywhere from you're making $0 to you're making, $250,000, maybe $500,000. Then you enter into phase two, which is you have more business maturity, you have recurring revenue, you know where you fit into the market,
Yep.
and now you're starting to make money, like you're starting to have tax bills that you have to pay or quarterly estimates. That's what I would say. Start thinking about hiring. I call it a financial success team. And on your financial success team should be an outsourced CFO,
Mm-hmm.
a bookkeeper, a tax strategist, and potentially a financial planner as well. I think where theory fits in the best is when you start moving into that seven figure, you've started crossing over into seven figures. But I would say don't let that dissuade you from being proactive about building out your financial success team. And I'm happy to, like, if you go to my website, you can book a call with me. I'm very accessible. I'd be happy to start to point you in the right direction of those advisors, because the earlier that you surround yourself with those advisors, the better off you'll be. So don't think, oh, I have to get to $1 million before I call Kaitlyn.
Right.
I would say once you start crossing over into that business maturity of you are paying yourself, you do have tax bills or quarterly estimates, and now you're trying to figure out, okay, like I'm paying myself above and beyond my basic living expenses. I need to start doing something with this money to start building personal wealth. When you have that thought, that's when we become a good fit for you, and you should start building out that team to support you.
I could not agree more. I've had many chapters in my own little entrepreneurial journey as a visionary CEO. I had a marketing agency at one point. I sold it. I mean, like a number of different versions of Veronica and like Madonna in the marketing world, I swear. But I have run my businesses differently, and I will say it's really even just like the last couple years where I have done it differently in the sense of exactly what you said. I knew even when I had $0, I'm like, I need a bookkeeper. I'm not going to do this myself. I'm not going to attempt to do. Nope. I'm going to have a bookkeeper. I'm going to have my CFO, obviously my accountant, wealth manager. But even right now, I meet with my CFO at least once a month at a minimum. And just having those level of conversations is so different because we are forward looking and we are future projecting as opposed to just like retroactively looking at the P&L and how much I spent on my credit card the month before. And I think that's a significant change when you're putting yourself out there and you're also not hiding from the money, because I know that money brings up a lot of mindset issues and a lot of scarcity that comes up because who knows how we were raised around money and what our parents said and things like that. But if you know your numbers, I feel like I stand 5 inches taller.
Yes.
Like I feel like I how do I say this? Like I feel like I conduct myself in a way that I want to be in the future. So even though let's say I'm not at 10 million today, I almost feel like I walk like I have 10 million. It's really interesting because I embrace it and I have conversations at that level and it feels more tangible to me than like a pipe dream. And I feel like I have more concrete milestones to achieving that objective, whether it's like, okay, and this is a conversation I have all the time, like, okay, when I hit X amount, or when there's X amount in the bank, or when there's X amount of profitability sustained over 3 to 6 months, then I can bring on X amount of person with this pay rate. Like, it's those level of like checks and balances that really give me a lot of comfort, and it's not subjective, and we're not manifesting. I'm not trying to diss those things, but I have literally been in conversations with 5 million plus CEOs, and they're telling their CFO that the projections for their revenue is because they manifested those numbers, and they're manifesting. And I'm like, what does that actually mean? Like, what? So like, I feel, to me, on a personal, just sharing my own story, the more that you can have those conversations with your financial success team, the more tangible and less intimidating it feels to feel like I'm in the driver's seat, projecting what I know I can achieve, because I have the eyes on the prize, so to speak, right?
Absolutely. And what's so great about that is that entrepreneurs are just naturally goal-oriented
Yes.
people. So give them the goals to achieve. Surround yourself with a financial success
Yep.
team that gives you the goal, and then put the blinders on to hit that goal. The manifesting thing got me for a second. I'm just like,
You've heard it, right?
yes. And like, don't get me wrong, I am such a woo person. I did hypnobirthing with my son. I'm about to do hypnobirthing with our second child. Like, there is a time and a place for meditation, manifesting, personal health. Absolutely. However, you cannot just manifest
Yeah.
your numbers.
Yeah.
You need to have, and I think the key phrase that you said is forward looking.
Yeah.
Like, we need to be planning. And that's exactly what we do on the personal planning side is, what's the goal? Let's reverse engineer
Yep.
it, and let's be strategic about it. Let's, like, if your goal is to be financially independent by 50, then that's going to give us a savings rate. And then from there,
Mhm.
we're going to divide that up into, okay, how do we save this amount of money in the most tax optimal way?
Yeah.
So it's like just bringing this level of intention. And yes, it doesn't sound as sexy as manifesting, but it helps you, the business owner, walk 5 inches taller, which
Mhm.
is a form of
Mhm.
manifesting and is empowering. So it's doesn't seem as feminine, but it's just as financially healthy. So yes, amen to that. I was like ferociously nodding.
Well, let's talk about being sexy. So, here's what I don't think is sexy. I don't think it's sexy to run your business with a scarcity mindset. I think it's
Yes, I agree.
extremely sexy to run a business as a female with an abundant mindset. And to me, abundance comes from setting goals and having, like you said, having a path. Not knowing what you're going to do or what you're working towards 6 months from now, a year from now, to me is terrifying. Like, absolutely terrifying, right? But to have a specific goal that I'm stating, that I'm working towards, and then again, being okay that the goal or the post, right, might change depending on life, right? Like, what happens if you expand your family? What happens if there's a significant shift in your family? Like, that's okay. And you've said it, like, some people you work with and they're trying to sell their company and then they fall back in love with their company. Like, life happens, and I'm accepting of that, and I'm not going to try to predict what will happen. I don't know the end of my movie. Like, that's not what this is. But still setting the intentions somewhere forward and setting a goal, being okay with the goal possibly changing if life takes me in a different direction, is still better than not setting any goal, burying my head in the sand, and then operating my business from a scarcity mindset, which is a really horrible place to build and scale and work your business, because that will penetrate your core. You'll be out of integrity with yourself. And then if you think that your team doesn't smell that, feel that, of course they do. That will absolutely affect them as well.
And I love everything that you just said. And just to add on to that point, that running a financially healthy company helps keep you in integrity.
Yeah.
So if you have 3 to 6 months of runway in the business in terms of operating expenses,
Yeah.
then you're not going to be in a position where you're forced to take on that bad client.
Yes. Sorry, that was another like mic drop moment. Yes, say it again.
Yes, it's true, because you're in a, and that's really, I think, entrepreneurs are after that feeling,
Yeah.
right? Like that feeling of stability,
Yeah.
because so much of what we do is not stable.
Yeah.
We're creating the future. And so having some stability through financial health in your company and in your personal life puts us in a really positive mental space. And I think that's especially when something like the pandemic happens. And I say this to all my clients, like, this is why having a financial success team, and this is why I don't do one-off financial plans, because it's between your personal life, your business, and federal legislation, which is the tax landscape essentially. Those three things are constantly changing. And so you need a team behind you to support you to react in the most intelligent and intentional way possible. So, and we really just want to put you in a position to stay in your zone of genius. I mean, that's really what we're trying to do.
Yeah, ditto. Here's what and I know that we could go on forever and ever. Here's what I love about you. And this is what I feel like when we first went on our Zoom date where we like kicked it off and I like wanted to take you home kind of moment. But you and I, when we counsel others, advise others, work with other people, number one, you and I are on the same page. We rather work with fewer people, but go more intimate, deeper, stronger relationships. That's something that you and I both share. Like neither one of us have this desire to be a servant for the masses. I rather serve less people, but be closer, more integrated in their life than just like one-off. And you and I both share that. The other thing that I love about you more than anything that means a lot to me and my own personal values is you're not going to say or advise anything out of integrity with yourself, but also out of integrity with what the client that you're serving desires too. Like it's important that I'm in integrity and I'm congruent with myself, but it's also important that the people that we serve and we try to almost like remind them and safeguard them and like, hey, remember your values, remember your goals, because it's important that we see our people be in integrity with themselves too, which is like, integrity is such a thing that we could have a whole dialogue about, but it's so critical and yet so vacant sometimes from the line of work that we do, and it's sad.
Yes. I mean, I will just echo those same sentiments. One thing that I love so much about you is how strong your moral compass is.
Oh, yeah.
And I know that it's not just talk. I know you've actually taken action to back that up in special circumstances before. And I really admire that about you.
Thank you. It's not always easy sometimes, but
we need Enneagram 8s in the world.
Oh yeah, I'm an Enneagram 8, yeah. And you love that about me. Like I feel so seen.
I do.
So this was amazing. And like I said, I would literally throw you at everybody that I meet and like everybody needs to talk to you. So how can people engage with you? How can people learn more about you? How people can get on a phone call with you and fall in love with you the way that I did?
Oh, well, thank you for asking. I'm very accessible. Like Veronica said, I want to go deep with people, and I'm happy to help anyone that comes our way, whether it's a fit now or a fit in the future. So the best way to reach me is by going to my website, which is theoryplanning.com. And at the bottom of my very simple website is a link where you can book a call with me. Or if you feel more comfortable, I have a very unimpressive Instagram called @theoryplanningpartners, and you can DM me there or send me a message on LinkedIn. I'm Kaitlyn Carlson on LinkedIn.
Amazing. Okay. I love you, my friend. You are an amazing human being, and I'm so grateful that you spent this time. And thank you for being on the Rainmaker podcast.
I love you too, and thank you for the great honor.
Thanks for listening to the Rainmaker podcast. We believe you can't get real results or have real relationships that last without being real first. If you resonated with today's episode, leave us a review so we can keep serving up the truth and tips that help you become the empowered leader that I know that you are. And always head over to veronicarami.com to check out all the free resources I have for you and the show notes from this episode. Until next time, my friends.